Hi, this is the Christians Forum, platform where believers meet to share practical steps in living our faith. I'm sharing today on developing a God-centered family. The series I'm going to share for a few weeks to come. Now, the broad idea of this series is to encourage every Christian to imbibe the concept of Christianity into our domestic lives, literally at home. The rationale here is that gradually it's beginning to look like the Christian faith is losing its foundation, that is the family. A lot of people go to church, a lot of people like to pray, but the idea of the Christian God becoming a part of the home is gradually fading. See, a good number of times when you do a survey or speak to people who claim to be Christ-centered, you realize that the concept of Christ-centeredness is more of an individual idea or mindset than a collective family thing. Most people tend to see themselves as Christian and would hardly make any extra effort to make sure that the people living under their roof take that concept. Now, even though this is becoming a struggle in the Christian faith, it is rather the norm in other faiths. For example, it is not uncommon to find that a child that is coming from another faith boldly understand the concept and the principles of that faith at home. It is not uncommon to see a parent enforcing the practices and the regulations of his faith, that is when they belong to other faith, in his house. But when it comes to the Christian, then other matters will pop up right now. And it's beginning to look as if it is only the Christian family that understands even the concept of human rights, etc., and child rights and all those kind of stuff. And so therefore, sometimes it's even difficult for the Christian father or mother to want to stress the child to admit or accept, assimilate the Christian concept. And so you find Christian parents consistently praying for their children to get to know God. It's not a bad idea, but it is an ineffective one. See, we do not have to pray our children into knowing our God. We will have to teach our children the practices and encourage them to embark on those practices in order to experience our God. Until we get to that point where we have this understanding, you realize that the Christian child or the Christian children at home will grow up literally as unbelievers. They grow up with the mindset that they will need somebody to pray for them, but they themselves, they don't have anything to do with prayer. Now, the average Christian child tends to have idea of what the Christian faith is. But as they grow, realize that they literally do not want to associate with the Christian faith. They would want to embrace a few of the concepts like patience, peace, etc. But the dedication towards Christ then becomes something different. It is very easy to pluck a child from any other faith, from his or her home, plant him in another place, and the child still maintains the ways of their faith. But try the same thing with the Christian child, then we get an issue. Until the Christian family understands that we have the mandate to first encourage and teach ourselves at home the ways of our God, we will never ever be able to get our family to follow the path of our God. It sometimes gets so embarrassing that you may have a dedicated wife who prays and does a lot of things, but cannot convince the husband, who supposedly is a Christian, to do so. And so therefore, when the child sees that open door with their father, they tend to align. Isn't it funny how a Christian parent would not want to associate with the father, especially on Sundays, etc., but they would want to push their children to go to church on Sunday? You want to ask yourself, if a child is learning from the parent, then the parent driving the child to church but not participating in church is rather doing the child a disservice. It's time for us to deliberately and consciously raise Christian homes. You see, the concept of godly homes is not a new thing. It's been there throughout the Bible. When you look at the life of Abraham, you realize that he raised his descendants with the mindset and ideology of his God. So then, when he died, it was okay or common for you to see Isaac repeating some of the spiritual practices of his father. So we literally then get the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and Isaac repeats the same thing in his family. We get the God of Jacob. Now, it's critical for us to understand the implication of this phrase. Now, the Bible continuously making reference to the God of Isaac, the God of Abraham, the God of Jacob is telling you what it meant. See, it is literally telling you how a certain Abraham was able to transfer the covenant he has with his God to his children, explain it to Isaac so that Isaac did not only have to become aware of the fact that his dad has a covenant with a certain God, but Isaac maintained it. Some of us have built covenant with this God. The question I would want to ask is, in your absence, can your children maintain it? In your absence, can your children pick up prayer the way you used to pray? In your absence, can your descendant pick up faith the way you used to do it? In your absence, your children, do they even understand the things that they are supposed to do for the Lord? See, today you do it so effectively. So the Lord responds to you. He provides for you. He is there for you. He's been revealing himself in your home, etc., etc. But you want to ask yourself, in your absence, what the Lord do say? If the answer is no, then quickly start raising your generation after you to understand the God you serve, to understand the ways of the God you serve, and most importantly, to understand the practices required by the God you serve. We need to raise a godly home. Now, in Joshua chapter 24, verse 15, Joshua makes that bold, profound statement. It says that we should choose this day whom you will serve, and if it pleases us, we can even consider the gods that we used to serve or our fathers served when they were beyond the river as in Egypt, or even the gods of the Amorites, the land they were dwelling. Then he makes a bold statement. As for him and his household, they would serve the Lord. Now, Joshua represented his family in this discourse. He makes a broad announcement, then makes an announcement that there is nobody under his roof who is going out of the fold when it comes to the way that he serves his God. I needed to understand that the Joshua approach is what we all ought to use. It says that, as for me and my household, and that is how the Bible requires us to serve the Lord. As for me and my descendants, we have chosen the Lord. Do your children have any reflection of who you are when it comes to service to the Lord? Until you understand this simple thing that I'm saying, you would spend a lot of time praying for a child who will eventually abandon your God when you are no more. Now, I'm going to share a few principles or practices that we need to be aware of or conscious of if you want to raise a godly family. First one I would want to share is that raising godly family will always have to be a deliberate agenda. Now, Joshua specifically includes his family in his decision. Why? Because he needs everybody in his household to align. We have to ensure that we put measures at home so that our children align. Isn't it funny? How somebody literally moves from their domain, goes to reside in another domain, and suddenly the person and their kids are all out of the presence and the sight of the Lord. See, wherever you find yourself, as you hear me, whether in your home or out of the house, you need to ensure that you yourself are aligning and make that conscious, deliberate decision that my household will have to align. Joshua said that as for him and his household, everybody will align. To raise a God-centered home requires that you make that deliberate decision that in my house, this is what must be done. Now, the second thing that I need you to understand if you want to raise a God-centered home is what was said in Deuteronomy chapter 6. You want to read from verse 6 to about verse 8. Now, the Bible clearly tells us that this instruction that the Lord is giving us, the instruction that the Lord is giving us, he says that We should talk about them when we get home. We should talk about them when we are in the street. We should bind them on our hearts. We should teach our children. And that is the way we raise godly children. It is not enough you picking a Bible and reading. It is not enough waking up at dawn praying. No, the Bible instructs us as Christian parents that we should make sure that we talk about the ways of our God. We talk about and teach the children that we are brought up the ways of our God. It is time for us to raise God-centered families. The noise is becoming louder and louder. And so therefore, if we don't find the patience to teach the children and the people in our home the ways of our God, eventually somebody is going to steal them. Now, one of the most profound parables that Jesus gave us has to do with the parable of the lost sheep. Now, in this parable of the lost sheep, for some interesting reason, Jesus put all of them in one place and one of them jumps out. Whatever it is that allowed that thing to jump out or entice the thing to jump out, we don't know. But you see, one of them jumped out. The Lord had to quickly go bring it back. We are likely to suffer the same thing if we do not do what the Bible is instructing us. It says that teach your children when you come home. It says that teach them when you are going on. When you are walking on the street, talk about it. When you are resting, talk about it. When you are lying down, you talk about it. Now let your children get to know your God. Let them get to know who He is. Let your home get to understand what makes your God works and what He hates. You see, sometimes it looks as if it is only the Christian faith where the parents are afraid to introduce their children. Yeah, people would want to raise you and cry, call it indoctrination, etc. But you want to ask yourself, how come it never happens in other faiths? Issues crop up and Christian parents are afraid. It's time for you to wake up. After you, the children that you are leaving behind, the generations that are going to come after you, must, of a necessity and of some degree of certainty, they must do the same thing you did. And I mean, worship the God you worship. Like I said, in order to do that, I've shared the first one. It has to be a deliberate thing. And the second one also, we need to teach them. Coincidences don't work. Coincidences don't work under this circumstance. If you do not introduce your God to your children, you want to ask yourself, who will do that for you? You want to ask yourself, who can do that for my children? The final thing I would want to share when it comes to raising a God-centered family is that there must be a God-centered moment at home. There should be that time within a certain period where we all sit down to either pray or do something about God. The environment that we create at home must be God-centered. Isn't it ironic how Christians will close church and close God? So from the time they close church to the next Sunday morning, there is nothing God at all. Yes, the mother wakes up at midnight and pray. Daddy wakes up at 4 a.m. and pray. The children supposedly pray on their own. But you see, it's not effective. There must be that God-centered moment. Even if it is not every day, there's that moment where everybody understands. In this moment, we meet because of the Lord we serve. Choose this day whom they would serve. But as for you, the Christian, and your household, there must be that deliberate agenda that for us, we belong to the Lord. Please listen. We have become a people who have been taught to pray for generational blessings. But there can never be a generational blessing when the generation you want to live it for do not know the source of the blessing. If Isaac had not been taught the ways of the Lord, Abraham had no business living anything with Isaac. If you don't teach them the ways of your God, then you have no business asking for the blessings of this God for them. Isn't it blackmailing? When we all know that our children do not even understand, they do not even have any idea about our God, and yet we are crying every day that the Lord should raise these children. I want to conclude this way. What will the Lord get if He makes your child a doctor? What does He stand to get if your child becomes that lawyer? Yeah, you are consistently praying that the Lord should make your child prosperous. Yeah, I know. You are consistently praying that the Lord should raise your child, open doors for your child. It's okay. The question you have not answered is for what? Why must the Lord raise your child and place him at the center or on the table of great men? You want to ask yourself, will your child even remember this God? Or the money that the Lord will open a door for him to get will eventually be used to fund agenda against his kingdom? Think about it. The Lord has no business blessing your generations if you have no interest or intention to raise them for him. Please listen. We are Christians, but being individual Christians at home is no longer enough. Let us go to the Bible standard. Like Abraham, like Jacob, like Isaac, like David, even Moses, etc. When Israel was in Egypt, they still make sure that their descendants understood that they did not belong to Egypt and that they belong to the Lord. Can you imagine a slave teaching his child the ways of his God and not the ways of his master's God? But that is what they did. You just traveled out of this country, you give birth to a Ghanaian child, and suddenly you are even afraid to teach the child the way of Jesus Christ. And yet you are busily fighting and praying that the Lord should turn your child around from whatever. No, it doesn't work like that. Let us raise Christ-centered families. Family that understand that the way that we live is the ways of Christ. Let us raise Christ-centered family. A family that understands that the things we do are the things allowed by Christ, and the things that we do not do, they are the things prohibited by Christ. Let us raise a family, a set of generation children who understand that they do not follow the path of another man, they only follow the path of Christ. A child who understands that he or she is a Christian, and so they must be proud about it. Raise a child who would rather go to school and be proud about Christ instead of the one who would rather go to school and do that which you encourage them to do. Very ironic. How a Christian parent can go to every length to put the child on television to do worldly things, and the same parent will struggle to introduce the child to just one verse of the Bible. We go very far. We drive them to the capital city. We buy mobile phone credit to support them just because we want them to do the things that the Lord hates. And when it comes to the things that the Lord requires for us to teach our family, then we start giving excuses. Some of us literally even get angry because our children won't pray. Then we abandon them. But then when the same child wouldn't go to school, the anger rather drives us to compel them to go. Think about these things. The Lord called us and made sure with this statement: when one man is saved, your whole house is saved. That literally is an indication that when the Lord calls you and you raise a family, He doesn't have to come down to raise another family within your family. You alone are enough. You are enough tool for Him that a generation that will come out of you will have to serve Him. Dear father, dear mother, dear owner of the house, dear business owner, do not neglect that duty of the Lord. Don't just pray for your children, raise them for Christ. God bless you.